Hello, this is Coach Terry, and I want to welcome you back to the ALT2HS Spotlight Podcast. This is episode 2, and today we're going to talk about my personal journey to unschooling. Everybody's got a story, and I'm going to share mine today. In episode 1, we laid down the foundation for what self directed learning really means, and we talked about how it's not simply just a hands off approach, but it's a dynamic, interactive, and a deeply respectful way to facilitate our children's natural curiosity and love for learning. We discussed the essence of trust in this process and how redefining education can lead to a transformative experience both for the learners and the parents and educators. In this episode, I want to share with you the turning points, the moments of doubt, and let me tell you, there were quite a few, and the decision to step into the world of homeschooling and eventually unschooling. It is a journey marked by trials, but more importantly, it is a journey that was illuminated by incredible potential and creativity that emerged when I dared to trust in a different path of learning and trust my children. So sit back, relax, and join me as we navigate the ups and downs, the insights and the breakthroughs in my personal unschooling journey. So, whether you're a parent that's pondering alternative education methods, or you're an educator that's looking for a fresh perspective, or you're just curious about the self directed learning journey, this story is for you. And for anybody who believes in the power of trusting our children's innate ability to learn. So my firstborn was very bright. We all like to think our children's very intelligent, right? So mine, like everybody else's kid, was really bright. Also very strong-willed, and this kid was really different. So he absolutely did not fit into the institutional education mold, and we tried. We tried really, really super hard. And I want to share that my son's journey and how that led to unschooling. My son's start to the schooling journey was already rough as a 5-year-old in kindergarten. He was pretending to not know things. He would apologize to me after school when he handed me like the little tests and stuff, and they were marked with things wrong. And I would be surprised, and he would apologize and say, "Mom, I answered that wrong because I didn't want to make the other kids feel bad." And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And every day after school, when I picked this poor kid up, he would absolutely just explode. So he'd make it through the day, and we'd come home, and there'd be an absolute meltdown. And after a couple hours, he would settle down, and we would spend the rest of the evening exploring, reading, learning. I mean, this kid just was nonstop with the questions. So between the start of school that year and Christmas, we went through 3 separate principals in that particular school. And each one promised to help me by getting him into a more advanced class. But then they would disappear before anything happened. And then there would be a new principal eventually. And the same thing, we'd have meetings and we'd talk, and they would determine that he needed to be in advanced class and it wouldn't happen, and they'd leave. And then the third principal finally came on board. And the third principal listened to me and took action. She told me in one of our meetings that she had observed my child in the classroom and that my child was fine, that they never acted out, they were polite. And obviously the problem was with me. So the exact words that she said were, "If you were a better parent, you wouldn't be having these issues." So I was like, okay. Basically, because I taught my child to be polite and courteous and kind, we were having these issues because the meltdowns would occur after school when it was safe for them to occur and not during school. So It was getting really close to Christmas at that point, and the kids' stress levels were so high. Getting ready for school in the morning was just atrocious. Picking them up after school in the evening was atrocious. And the Christmas break was so wonderfully relaxing that we decided not to go back after Christmas. I mean, we didn't even go back and pick up the sleep mat and the crayons. I just sent them a notification that I was withdrawing him with the intent to homeschool. And then I just let him play because at 5, that's what they should be doing. But then I accepted a contract for work that required full-time on-site work. And I registered him for a kindergarten program at a local, very highly recommended private school. So he spent the rest of the year in kindergarten at the private school, and it was really pretty rocky. And then we had first grade. So we continued in this way. I was still working, continued in this way. We let him move into the first grade. But his teacher in first grade taught him and everybody else in his class to absolutely hate math. She was forcing really high pressure math facts time quizzes on the kids every morning, putting just a tremendous amount of pressure on them. I heard from parents later that for 6 years she tortured kids until the school finally let her go. But what was interesting, there was some pressure about reading too. So this child was a advanced reader, and because he stuttered a little bit when he spoke, when he tried to read out loud. The teacher put him in an easy reading class or section of the class, and he was really bored and incredibly frustrated. So there were some issues with first grade, but we muddled through it. There weren't horrific meltdowns at the end of the day. But so we moved into second grade. You know, we're taught that this is where the kids need to be. They need to be in a learning environment like this where they're being taught, right? So second grade went pretty quiet. My son pretty much reserved himself to just getting by. And the school was challenging enough so that he was mostly interested in the stuff he was doing and learning languages and doing theater and some other stuff that he found really interesting. And his grades for second grade were all E's for excellent. And there were occasionally some notes on the grade reports about social or playground issues, but nothing dramatic or terribly, alarming. But at the end of the year, the teacher invited us both into a parent-teacher conference. And she had the little chairs sitting outside in the hallway for the children, but she insisted that my child come in. And I thought that was interesting. I figured, in a case like that, usually they're going to say something nice about the kid. But no, that's not what happened. So this teacher told me, "I'm thinking of holding your son back a year." And I was really surprised. And I was really surprised that she said this in front of my child. I was like, why on earth are you going to hold back a student who gets a report card that's loaded with E's? I really just couldn't believe what she said. And she's like, well, your son daydreams. He's always staring out the window and he's never listening to me. He's never paying attention to me. I was like, but he turns in the work. It's all perfect, right? And how does he do on his tests? Well, he does really good on his tests. So I was like, I don't get it. And so the teacher was like, if he doesn't learn how to control himself and pay attention, he's never going to amount to anything. So she just told my child that he would never amount to anything. He's going to be a failure. Those were her words. He'll never amount to anything. He'll be a failure. And I feel that if I could spend another year with him, I could break him of that habit. And I was just shocked. So I was like, okay. So you want to take a child who excels and who already shows signs of boredom, and you want to make him sit through you and the same material again. How do you really think that's going to work out? I was so completely outraged, not just that this teacher was so small minded, but that she insisted on having this conversation in front of and over a child. I felt really sorry for this adult who was clearly intimidated by bright children and felt the need to break and control them. It was really disappointing. So my husband and I discussed the issues and the alternatives, and we made the decision to homeschool. So I was running my own graphic design business. I was working at home again at that point, and I could just keep him with me. Um, and ironically, even though one of my biggest frustrations was the methods of institutional instruction, right? I did exactly what like everybody else does. I brought school home. So I followed the school routine. It was what I knew. I got curriculum. It's what I knew. I had the kid on a schedule. You're going to get up, you straighten your room, have breakfast, and be ready to start school at 9. And then we'll take a lunch break, and then we'll continue learning until 2:30. And I had it all mapped out. We were going to study language and math and social science and all that stuff. But my son had different expectations, completely different expectations. And his frustrations with the same old system grew into all sorts of acting out. So now it was me, right? Now, what the principal had said, if I was just a better parent, I wouldn't have these issues. Well, if I was just a better teacher, I wouldn't have had these issues. Um, so I was pulling my hair out, desperately looking for answers. We tried different approaches. I tried different curriculum. I'm sure if you're a homeschooling parent, you probably know this drill. Nothing worked. There had to be a better way. And so meanwhile, I was disenchanted and growing increasingly more frustrated by the way that subjects are chopped up and everything's unrelated and out of context and the way I teach our kids. So I was looking for different alternatives. And this was 15 years ago, probably. So we tried the approach of spending a whole day on one subject, and that worked a little bit better. We could deep dive into some stuff, but it was still kind of contrived, and it was still based on a curriculum. Um, it was more interesting because we could deep dive, but it was still limiting. And then there were topics, that we didn't enjoy. So when we hit those days, it was absolute hell. So the struggle continued. He, knowing that he didn't like the way that school was being presented, and me knowing that there had to be something better, something that was more holistic. And so I continued to research that. I continued to research that, and I was also working towards an education degree. And my frustrations at that end were soaring as well, because on one hand, I'm struggling with finding a learning methodology that works now for my two children that I was homeschooling, and on the other hand, I'm in a program for teaching licensure, which was basically teaching me how to manage, reprimand, and train school children to basically sit down, shut up, and learn. And oh, by the way, you're going to learn all these disconnected bits of information, and we're just going to stuff it in your head. So my brain was like exploding with the irony of all of this. And I ended up switching my college degree because I couldn't take it at that end, and I couldn't take it at the home end either. It was really interesting. So in my research, I found something called unschooling, and I checked it out. And the definition all those years ago was really kind of vague. Um, initially, it sounded really intriguing to me, but the more research I did, the more it kind of freaked me out. Google, if you went to Google back then, I can't even remember if it was Google back then. It probably was something different. Revealed a really simplistic explanation of it. And to unschool meant to just leave everything up to the kid. And I was like, what? No, that's not going to work, right? So how can they possibly learn anything? And I was like, okay, back to the drawing board. There's got to be a better way. That's like legitimate. And we continued in this way until I was offered another short term. It was a 6-month consulting job with my friends in the NOAA Ocean Exploration Office. It was a 3-hour commute, and the catch was that I needed to be there 3 days a week. So those would be really long days, and I didn't want to turn it down. And my dad was like, "You go ahead. I'll take care of the kids while you're gone, and we'll homeschool." I was like, "Okay." It's 6 months. I know Dad's not going to really do any schooling with my kids. They're just going to play all day. But 6 months, we can make it up, right? They won't be, quote, too far behind. So 3 days a week, there was absolutely no official homeschool. And that job expanded. And for a year and a half, guess what my kids did? Nothing. They did nothing. I had moments of absolute sheer panic while I was in the middle of this, but I was too busy or too tired to do anything. And all I kept thinking was, oh my God, they're getting so far behind. They're getting further behind. They're getting further behind. And at first, there were lots of video watching and anime and manga reading, manga, whatever it is. My kids love that stuff. And building things with Legos. The little one was like really into Legos, and his grandfather was happily buying him bigger and bigger and bigger sets. So I wanted to regain control, right? Control. But I was too busy. I was too tired. But then after a short time, they started asking questions. And I was like, what is this? Like, where are they even getting this information to be even thinking about these questions? And they were requesting specific books. And then they were asking for technology tools to develop their own books, to write stories and to make videos. They were asking for help developing a website. The oldest one, my oldest son, was working on a business plan because he found out he could apply for an ag loan and start his own business. I think he was 11 when he started that project. They were asking for trips to this and that, relating to things that they were interested in. And I'll tell you what, the further along we got and the more engaged they were in whatever projects they were deep diving into, I was absolutely floored. I was like, what is this? They were learning, they were creating, and they were doing it on their own without me. And while Pop-Up either joked with them or dozed in the living room chair, they were learning. And I have to tell you, it was amazing. And it was very eye-opening. So when I described the phenomenon to a friend of mine, her comment was like, well, yeah, of course your kids would go all academic. And I was like, what? My kids aren't that special, and neither am I. So I was really surprised by that comment. She didn't get it. Mine are absolutely no different from any other kid. And at first, they literally burned up Netflix, YouTube, and Legos. Literally burned it up. But then there was a question, and that question caused a spark. And it didn't take too much to turn those sparks into forest fires. And kids, all of them, are very hungry to learn. They're starving, in fact. And they just have to remember that. And that's exactly what happens when you leave behind the established curriculum. So this is what learner-centered learning is. It's finding that tiny little spark of curiosity, and it's puffing gently on it until it takes hold and really starts to burn. And then you know what? You get out of the way. There's no controlling it. There's no trying to push it in one direction or the other. You just let it burn. You get out of the way, except to encourage it and to make appointments with more people who can fan the flames or more resources. You drive them to places that will help keep it going, and you help them find folks and things that will guide them. And if it burns itself out, that's okay. You look for the next little hint of a spark and you repeat that process. Meanwhile, they're learning in context And all the little pieces of whatever it is working together, all of it makes sense. So by the end of the year, I had one child with a market goat business because, yes, they put together their plan and I dropped them off at the USDA office. I did not go inside. They went in, they made their pitch, and they literally walked out with a check for $5,000. I had that child started his own goat business, was studying genetics, monitoring breeding, learning herbal remedies and natural care, keeping business records, and working on a website to help with marketing. He was also interested in wolves and wolf conservation. Um, so the other child was an avid Indiana Jones fan, and together we studied all things archaeology. And I have to say, that 8-year-old at the time held a 40-minute conversation with a high school religion and mythology teacher. He is a philosopher. He loves to study culture, religions, mythology, and more. And he is very interested, he was at the time and did for so many years, in Minecraft, and started making his own Let's Play videos and posting them to his YouTube channel. And what was really interesting at the time is he wasn't even reading yet. This child is autistic and dyslexic. And at this point, I was totally letting them have their reign to teach themselves what they needed at any given moment and what they were able to handle. And when he was 11 years old, he taught himself to read. So they may sound special. To me, they are, of course, but my kids are no different than your kids and other kids. The only difference is how they were allowed to learn and what they were trusted with. And I want you to listen to that again. What they were trusted with. I had a ton of bad training and brainwashing to let go of, and I did. And in doing it, I opened their minds and opened my mind. And today, as I watch my children thrive, pursuing their interests and learning at their own pace, I know that I've made the right choice. I know that their journey of unschooling has been a learning experience for me as well, and pushing to unlearn and relearn many preconceived notions about education and about teens, if I'm going to be completely honest. So that's it. I wanted to share that story with you. I hope it's inspirational. I hope it gets you thinking about the possibilities for your children and for unschooling and self-directed learning. And even if you just incorporate little tidbits of this stuff, it can make a huge difference. So with that, I'm going to sign out, and I thank you for listening.